Passionate, driven, enthusiastic, euphoric. This is who we are as entrepreneurs. But how we leverage these incredible attributes to dream and build businesses that scale and grow is what this podcast is all about. Hello, I'm attorneypreneur Josh Brown, and welcome to Franchise Euphoria. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Franchise Euphoria. Josh Brown here. Hope everyone is doing fan-freaking-tastic. I know I am, and I am thrilled to be here today. Today, instead of an interview, you're going to get me. I've been getting a lot of questions lately on something that I want to talk about today, and that is home-based franchises, something that really has become more and more popular over the last probably 5 years or so. And part of it is there's a lot of people who were looking to get back into the small business game. Maybe they've raised their children or worked out of the home, and now they want to get back in the game, but don't necessarily want to go back to the corporate world. And hence you have home-based franchises that are very, very attractive to a lot of these people because it provides the flexibility that they like. It provides a lower investment, and you don't have the brick or mortar aspect. In case you don't know, a home-based franchise is just as it sounds. You don't have to have an office. Now, in most of them, you can get a separate office, but it's not necessary to operate the franchise. This is a very, very different model from the traditional type franchise, traditional type brick and mortar franchise, whether you're talking about a restaurant or some other type of business. So why don't just take a few minutes today and highlight some things that I think people should know about before they invest their money in a home-based franchise. One caveat is I don't have anything necessarily against home-based franchises. I just think that you need to be very, very careful, as you do with all franchises, before you buy. So here's a few things that you should be thinking about. First of all, whenever you're looking at a home-based franchise, and again, let me give you an example. Maybe it's a tutoring franchise. Maybe you're looking at purchasing some sort of tutoring franchise where you don't have a brick or mortar presence. What you're really buying is the system that the franchise has to offer, right? I mean, you're not buying any kind of retail design or outfit. It's just a matter of what is the system that they have to offer. Oftentimes with home-based franchises as well, the brand hasn't necessarily been developed. And so you need to really, really be thinking about what it is that you're actually purchasing before you're going to part ways with your hard-earned money. So first things first, how long has the franchise been around? If this is one of those home-based franchises that popped up recently over the last couple years, you really need to think about, do they have any brand traction so far? I mean, does anybody recognize them in the marketplace? If not, then obviously that's going to factor into what type of or the amount of the franchise fee that you're going to be willing or you should be willing to spend on the franchise. What kind of system do they have? What are you really getting from them? Oftentimes I hear from people who, in the excitement of buying a business and becoming their own boss and the excitement of not having to do it all themselves, they very quickly buy one of these home-based franchises for, let's say, a $10,000 franchise fee. They get their materials, maybe they do some light training, and then they're off and running. But what happens is, 6 months down the road, they really start to question, what is the value I'm now getting from my franchisor? I paid them all this money. I'm continuing to pay a royalty, which is a percentage coming out of my profits, of my gross profits, back to the franchise system. And they're getting that indefinitely throughout the entire franchise agreement. But what are they really giving to me? I find this issue pops up a lot with home-based franchises because, after all, once you have that system set up, a lot of times there's not much more to it. There is really no significant training component. And when you're dealing with a home-based franchise, there's really not much setup. So again, always be thinking to yourself, what is the system that I'm actually buying, and what kind of value can you associate with that system? The next thing is, how much is the total investment? I think a lot of times people, again, in their haste to get into a system and, in their haste to avoid what they believe might be a headache, or what they believe they don't have the confidence to pursue themselves, they overpay for a franchise system. And I think this happens all the time. And again, you really have to have an idea of what you are really, really getting in exchange for your money. And I will tell you this, the franchise disclosure documents, franchise agreements, you really have to understand what you're looking at. And those documents are complicated, convoluted, and so you really need a professional to help you with that. What kind of royalty percentages is the business requiring of you, and is it worth it for the franchise? Always something you should consider in any type of franchise purchase, but especially with a home-based franchise, you've really got to ask yourself, why are you giving 6, 7, 8, possibly higher percentages back to the franchise, or what are you really gaining from that? And last but not least, obviously when you're in a home-based franchise, you don't really have a designated territory that you're operating out of. I think you need to give real good thought to where your competition is and where the franchisor has other people set up. I mean, when you're essentially looking at a home-based franchise and your location isn't as important as the actual product, you have to know where you're going to find your customers and in what general area you're going to be able to get your customers, and how many other franchisees of that franchise system are surrounding you, are close to you. So you have to understand, so that you're not competing against yourself or competing against others in the franchise system, how the entire territory breaks down. I guess all in all, what I would say, just as a forewarning with some of the home-based or non-brick and mortar franchises, is just be extra careful in looking and thinking about what it is you're actually trying to achieve. And most importantly, how is the franchisor going to help you achieve that? Don't place too much emphasis on the front end and think in a short-sighted way, and then 6 months down the road realize that the franchisor is really not providing any help, and you don't know why you're part of the system, because you've got it all figured out and set up yourself. This happens all the time in franchising. I want you to avoid that. Obviously, I think that before you purchase any type of franchise, whether it's a home-based franchise, a traditional brick and mortar franchise, or really any kind of business, you definitely need to do your due diligence, take your time with it, and seek out professional help so that you can have good assistance along the way from people who really have been there before and understand what the legal relationship is like. Hopefully this was helpful for you today. If you are in the market for a franchise, I would highly encourage you to check out my free ebook, which is What to Know Before You Buy a Franchise. You can head over to my website at that's INDY franchiselaw.com and download it there for free. And let me know what you think. If you're enjoying this podcast, if you're enjoying the value that you're getting from this podcast, I'd also invite you to go to iTunes and provide me with a rating and review. It always helps for visibility on the podcast. So thank you so much for your support, and hope this episode was helpful to you.
Thanks for being with us today on the Franchise Euphoria podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to go to iTunes and provide a review. Also, please remember that although Josh Brown is a licensed and practicing attorney, nothing contained in this podcast should be construed as legal advice, because it is not. The information contained in this podcast is general and educational in nature, and none of it should be relied upon as legal advice. That being said, if you have questions for Josh and would like to contact him, please email him at josh@franchiseeuphoria.com. Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you tune in to our next weekly episode.